Hi, Professor Dyer here, talking about research in human development and family science. Since I teach research in human development and family science, I'm sometimes asked, why is research even necessary in this field? I mean, humans have been pretty successful. We've been getting in relationships. We've been developing through the lifespan, creating friendships, creating romantic relationships, growing into old age for a while now. Isn't it really just common sense? I'm going to suggest to you that HDFS is not just common sense, and I have three main arguments to support my position. The first is that if this was common sense, we'd be doing better. In truth, we have persistent social problems related to development, related to close personal relationships that we haven't been able to solve, and in some cases they are getting worse. I'll show you a bunch of examples. Depression rates. This is a Gallup survey of people in the United States. Depression rates are very high. 29% of people report at some point in their lifetime being diagnosed by a medical professional with depression. And notice that the rates are climbing over the last few years. Specifically, this is a problem for young adults. Look at how high the numbers are for young adults. Having a depressive episode in the last year, just in the last 12 months, is at about 17% for adolescents and for young adults. Because I work on a college campus, I pay attention to what's going on with college students. College students seem to be having the worst time. And please see the depression rate there is pretty high. About 40% of the time when a student comes into the counseling center, they're there for the depression. Notice, however, that 46% of the time they're coming in for anxiety. That has skyrocketed over the last decade or so. Notice also that they're very likely to come in with relationship problems. So their relationships are not going as they would like either. Loneliness is a growing problem in the United States. 22% of adults say that they always or often feel lonely. And notice how much it affects other areas of their life. They say it affects their mental health, their physical health, their relationships, their ability to do their job. A lot of people are suffering with loneliness. Then there are things that we should be teaching our children, but we're having a hard time being successful at it. This is the percentage of fourth graders who agree with various statements. Fathers should be in charge in the home. A wife should always obey her husband even if she disagrees. There's a kid in America who feels that way? Yeah, a measurable number, a worrying number of children are reared with very sexist beliefs. What about racist beliefs? Yeah, that too. The rate of hate crimes in the United States is on the rise, and it's really never been very low. It's high. We have sexism and racism that are plaguing children's development. I'm going to keep going. The list of problems is extensive. Look at how many women and men have experienced sexual assault, stalking, sexual harassment. These numbers are stunning. These problems are quite prevalent in our society. 1 in 3 women, 1 in 4 men have experienced violence, intimate partner violence in their lifetime. I'm a sleep researcher, so I'm interested in the quality of sleep that people are getting. Please first look at the blue bar. These are adults who don't have kids. Almost a third of them are sleeping for less than 7 hours a night. That's not enough. And how do I know that's not enough? Look at the far right side of this chart. About 40% of adults who do not have children wake up not feeling well rested at least 4 days a week. They're not getting enough sleep. And then please look at the green bar. Look what's going on with single parents. They are not getting enough sleep. This isn't good for their work. It's not good for their parenting. And it's not good for their personal happiness. Parents are having a hard time in general, whether they're single or not. Look how many of them are worrying about their kids suffering with anxiety or depression, or their kids being bullied, their kids being kidnapped or abducted. These are not rare concerns. 22% of parents are worrying, very worried or extremely worried about their kids getting shot. Parenting is not easy. Divorce rate is it's going down for almost everyone in the United States. Our divorce rates are quite high, but they've been going down for quite some time. But a new phenomenon has popped up recently, and that is divorce in the later half of life. 50 and older, divorce rates are actually increasing for middle-aged and older adults. So, man, things aren't going well. In many ways, things are okay, but we have some room for growth when it comes to human development and when it comes to close personal relationships. If it were common sense, we would be doing better and none of these indicators would be getting worse. A second argument that I can make to convey that no, HDFS is not just common sense is that common sense claims are not common. Common would mean that they're universally shared. There's just nothing common. We don't agree about anything. So common sense, what does that even mean? This is problematic for the concept itself. In fact, we often simultaneously believe things that are in direct contradiction to each other. And of course, things that feel like common sense at one point in your life or at one moment in history often look very different later in one's life or at a later part in history. Let me show you some examples. An example of how we simply don't agree with each other is just the concept of what is old. What makes a person old? I have to think that the 13% of people who say that you're old if you have gray hair, I have to think those are children. I don't know. But you can see that we can't even agree with each other on what the word old really means. Contradictory feelings, beliefs that we hold simultaneously. Many of us believe that opposites attract, and we see people who are dissimilar to each other, and we say, yes, well, opposites attract. And then maybe the same day, we see people who are very like each other, and we think that's a good pair. Obviously, they seem so similar to each other. And we just hold both beliefs in our mind at the same time without really noticing there's a contradiction. And common sense beliefs often work like that. Beliefs change over time. If you look at generations in the United States and the belief that spanking is appropriate, this has changed drastically generation to generation to generation. Another belief that has changed drastically over time in the same population is support for same-sex marriage. You can see the crossover there that happened 2010 or 11, but the change, culturally speaking, has been drastic and within a short period of time. What seemed common sense in 2004 no longer seemed common sense in 2019 or today. Not only do things change over time, but things change by the context. Most parents in the United States believe that spanking of children is sometimes necessary, but look, we don't allow children to be spanked in some institutions. We do not allow them, by and large, to be spanked in schools, in penal institutions, or as a sentence for crime. But we do think that in the home or the daycare center, spanking should be allowed. At least that's what's reflected in our laws. So what is common sense changes by context. It's contradictory, and we hold contradictory beliefs at the same time. A third argument that I can make that HDFS is not just common sense is that many things we believe that we take to be common sense are not true. We're wrong about a lot of these things. Some examples of things that I have measured in my own students, and you can see here I asked some questions over the last few years, but the vast majority of my students believe that eating a lot of sugar makes kids hyper. It does not. That is perhaps a common sense belief, and it is false. The belief that parents and teachers should frequently praise children to raise their self-esteem. Number one, frequently praising children does not raise their self-esteem. And number two, even if it did, that wouldn't produce any good outcomes in any way, shape, or form that anyone has ever been able to demonstrate. These beliefs are false. Most of my students believe that men and women have very different styles of communicating, that gender produces communication styles that cause conflict in romantic relationships. Not true. Also, 80% of my students believe that a child's birth order affects their personality. Debunked. Not true. It's wrong. And finally, almost 80% of my students believe that every person has a learning style, and they will learn better if information is presented to them in the style that is congruent with the way they learn best. False. Most people do not have a learning style. A very small fraction of people might be classified as having a learning style, but if they are instructed or if they study in the style that they say is their learning style, they don't learn any better than they learn if they study in other modes. All of these things are false. They're all believed to be common sense by many, many people, and they're not true. So these are my 3 arguments for the fact that HDFS is just not common sense.